First of all, let's read through it. It says the prairie dog has always been considered a problem for American cattle ranchers. They dig holes that cattle and horses can step in. They can injure themselves. They step in the holes. They eat grass, and the farmers need the grass for the cattle. Recently, ranchers have discovered that there's a demand for prairie dogs as pets. In some areas, prairie dogs can sell for as high as $150. So cattlemen are now fencing off prairie dog towns on their land so these towns will not be disturbed by their cattle. First of all, this is not true. But if it were, then here are our questions. And if for anybody that doesn't know what a prairie dog looks like, those are prairie dogs. Okay? All right. So anyways, it says draw a production possibilities frontier showing a rancher's production option between cattle production and prairie dog production, showing increasing opportunity cost, and show what would happen in each of the following situations. And this is key here. It says use a separate graph for each situation. In fact, why am I doing this with my fingers when I got the nice pen here? All right. So first things first. Let's draw this increasing. Where is it? Increasing opportunity cost. That means we have to have a specific shape to our graph. So first of all, I'm going to draw a starter graph, and I have the option of cutting and pasting here. So I'm going to take advantage of that. Okay. Let me try this again. What the? All right. I don't know what. Okay. Let me try this again. Vertical axis. Why is that? Okay. Horizontal axis. And I want to draw a curve, a bowed out curve it's called. This is the shape that they want to see when they say increasing opportunity cost. Now, it doesn't matter which axis I choose for prairie dogs and which axis I choose for cattle. It really doesn't. But you do have to label them. So I'm going to label this prairie dogs, PD for prairie dogs, and I'm going to label this C for cattle. All right, and I am going to take advantage of this. I'm going to copy this and paste it. All right, so I'm going to move this down. I'm going to move the questions up, and let's get into this. All right, so question A. Draw a production the outcome is efficient, with ranchers choosing to produce equal numbers of cattle and prairie dogs. So efficient means I have to be producing at a point on the curve. All right, and stop me if I'm going too fast or if you're not understanding, because this is the day we're dedicating to this type of problem. So it's on you to make sure you ask if you have questions. Okay. All right, so I have to be on the curve because it says the outcome is efficient, and I have to produce equal number of cattle and prairie dogs. I don't want to be up here because that's mostly prairie dog and almost no cattle. I don't want to be down here because that's mostly cattle and almost no prairie dogs. Okay. So I want to just be in the middle. I want to just basically make a point right around here. So it looks like I have equal numbers. And honestly, I would just give you credit for this because it looks like you're trying to be in the middle. But if you want to really go full out, you could put a number down here like 10 and put the same number over here. Or if you want to get like mathematical, you could say this is X and this is X. But for me, a dot right around here in the middle would have been good enough to get credit for part A. How are we feeling about that one? Do we understand it? or no?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. All right, let's do this again. Okay, let's do part B. Okay, so part B we'll put here. All right, now, as a protest against the government introducing the gray wolf back into the wild. So maybe the government's protected wolves. So now they're living near these farms, and farmers are afraid of them attacking the prairie dogs and the cattle. So I don't know how this is going to hurt the government, but ranchers decide to withhold 25% of the available grassland for grazing. All right. So they have this grassland, all right, and they're not using it. They have resources they're not using. Where am I if I'm not using all my available resources?
On the inside?
I'm on the inside. Exactly. So I want to put a point anywhere in here. That's it. All right. Let's take on part C. I am going to erase some of this stuff here. Just okay. Let's see. Just to make room. I'm recording this if you need to watch it again. Okay. So let's take on part C. All right. It says that the price of prairie dogs, see, these farmers were able to sell their prairie dogs for $150 each, but now all of a sudden they can get $200 for them. So they decide to to take additional land and use it for prairie dogs. All right, farmers have all kinds of land. That's how they make their money. They do different stuff with the land that they have. They grow corn. They grow any kind of crops, strawberries, pumpkins. They can raise cattle on the land. They use the land in a lot of different ways. So before they had a certain amount of land dedicated to prairie dogs and cattle. Now they're increasing the amount of land that they're dedicating to prairie dogs. So they have new resources, all right, that they didn't have before for raising prairie dogs. So what happens is the amount of prairie dogs that they can make at a maximum is now higher, and they still have the same amount of resources and land available for cattle. And anytime you show a change in a production possibilities curve, people want to see where you started and where you ended up. So an arrow. The curve shifts out like this. And that's what they're looking for part C. They're going to dedicate additional resources to producing prairie dogs, so now they're capable of producing more prairie dogs than they could before. How are we feeling about that one?
Can you explain that again?
Yeah. So this right here, ranchers decide to allot additional land for prairie dogs. All right, it's basically like new land. It's kind of like the equivalent of a technological advance in raising prairie dogs. All of a sudden, we're dedicating more land for prairie dogs, so we're able to produce more than we could before. We're not taking any land away from cattle, so this maximum amount of cattle that we could produce before is still the same. It hasn't gone up or down, but now since we have new land for raising prairie dogs, we've increased our maximum number of prairie dogs that we can raise. Is that helping or not helping, Hala?
The part that I don't understand is like the arrow, the new arrow.
Say that one more time, please.
The new arrow in the graph.
Yeah. Yeah, so the arrow shows that the graph shifted outward. The possible production of cattle and prairie dogs has now shifted outward, where we basically, for any amount of cattle, now we're capable of producing more prairie dogs. All right, so basically we've increased our ability to produce prairie dogs. So for this number of cattle, I used to be able to produce this many prairie dogs, but now I can produce more. For this number of cattle, I used to be able to produce this many prairie dogs, but now I can produce more. And obviously, if I don't use any land for cattle, I can do a lot more prairie dogs. Still having a little trouble with that one?
No, I got it.
All right. All right, D is kind of similar. Hopefully, it'll help you out with your understanding of C as well. All right, so let's okay, what am I doing? Okay. All right, let's take a look at Part D. So Part D, the government grants land. It grants new leases to ranchers, so it gives them 10,000 new acres of grassland each for grazing. So these ranchers, they have 10,000 new acres to do what they want with, so they can produce more prairie dogs and more cattle. So the curve is going to shift outward like this. Now they're going to have a higher number of prairie dogs they can produce and a higher number of cattle. Again, you always want to show which direction you went in. I could produce less of each. Now I can produce more of each. And that's how we sketch change in production possibilities. Now I can produce more prairie dogs and cattle because I have new resources. Before I could not produce out here because I didn't have enough resources to do that. It was infeasible. But now that I have new resources, new land, now I can produce out here. Now my maximum limits of production are out here, whereas they used to be in here. How are we feeling about Part D?
Good.
All right. Anybody have any questions or comments on Part D? All right, then let's finish this up. So Part E. Let's use this sketch for Part E. All right, a drought, which means a long period of time with no rain. There's a drought, so it's destroyed most of the available grass for grazing of cattle. All right, cattle need to eat grass, but it's telling us prairie dogs have other things they can eat. They can also eat plant roots, which is going to destroy your plants, but the prairie dogs aren't really, they're indicating to us that the prairie dog population isn't really going to be affected by the drought and the lack of grass. But cattle are going to be affected. So now we used to be able to produce this many cattle at maximum, but now less because we don't have as much grass. The drought destroyed the cattle's grass. So this has moved in, and prairie dogs are not affected. And again, I want to show that this shifted inward. My ability to produce cattle has been affected, but my ability to produce prairie dogs has not. So for any given number of prairie dogs, this number of prairie dogs, I used to be able to produce this many cattle, but now I'm in here. This many prairie dogs, I used to be able to produce more cattle, but now I'm less. Basically, at any level of prairie, both, the number of cattle is going to be less. All right, so I'll take any questions, but I want you to know that